All right, so you want to spice up your beats. I see you in the back, Steve. I see you in the back. I got you. Got you. Today we're going to be going over something highly requested from a lot of you guys. You want to know some tips and tricks about how to get your beats to, I guess, flourish, add that little, I guess, like a little flair to your beats or whatever. So today we're actually going to be going over how to spice up your beats. So in this video we're going over a lot, but they're all going to be short bullet points. So if you want to skim around, I might have timestamps in the description. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. We're going to be going over drums, melodies, transitions, programming, even down to the master chain, and we're going to go over arrangement towards the end of the video. So stick around for that. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so first things first is melodies. Melodies, super important in a beat. You want to make sure those are flourishing with the drums and everything's cohesive. There's so many ways to do that, honestly. First thing I would definitely recommend is try, after you make your melodies or whatever and you bounce it, try reversing it. Obviously, if it reverses it, then the beginning notes are going to be at the end of the loop and stuff like that. So it is a little bit confusing. Actually, when I made this beat here, I reversed the melody and it sounded super fire. Another thing you could do is add hella effects to melodies. You got delay, reverb, detune. That's the most popular one, putting like RC20. There's a new one I actually just picked up the other day, and it's called Cassette, and it sounds really nice. It's a nice little vintage plugin, and I haven't bought it yet. I gotta go buy this. Another popular thing to do is add halftime on your melodies. I actually also have halftime. I finally got it reactivated on here. I've been using Crossbeat because I couldn't really be bothered to activate halftime. So yeah, this is another really dope plugin. Another thing that helps your melodies out a lot is sample chops. So we call them sample chops, but you can just call it chops, I guess. But this is basically when you go straight into the audio clips of like your loops or samples and you just start chopping it. You can make several chops and change up the melody and make your own unique melody and then bounce it out again. That's another thing. You can bounce your melodies. This melody that I have in here was bounced about like 3 or 4 times, and then I pitched it down, then I put effects on it. All of that kind of goes into like this progression of making a melody. And you kind of have to have a certain flow with it. So another thing you could do is stack or layer your melodies. So if you have like 2 melodies, different keys, I could do that in a different video, but if you pitch them to the same key, it might sound super fire. You never know. So the most important tip is pitch your melodies, pitch them around, just play around with the pitches and see which one sounds the best, because most times in a lot of beats I can recognize a sample simply because obviously the sample itself and the way the melody goes and how it progresses. If it's a very popular melody, we're all going to know what it is, right? You could tell that no one pitches the melody down. It's in the original key that the sample or loop was found in, and that makes it seem really unoriginal, and it kind of turns off a lot of people from listening to the beat, because it's like, hey, we heard this freaking sample like 100 times already. Second most important, first most important for me, but for you guys, it's going to be drums. First and foremost, turn it up. No one can even critique you because the beat is so low in volume. Like, have to make sure your levels are correct. The best way to do that is to turn it up. Turn that volume up. Don't be afraid to push that volume knob up. Another thing you could do with drums, as you can do with melodies, is reverse it. Sometimes I put like little reverse kicks right before like a beat drops or something like that, and it creates a little bit of tension right before the beat drops. And you can reverse a lot of other things. Like in this beat, I have a rim that's reversed. That works out really well and adds a nice little atmosphere to this type of beat. Make sure you're pitching your drums. I think in this beat I actually did pitch the kick down quite a bit. Yeah, so on here I have it pitched. It looks like it's pitched up, but it's being pitched down. So for this beat I pitched it down because it had this better blend with the 808, so I just left it in there like that. You have to do this every time you make a beat, because sometimes the kick and the 808 doesn't blend and it ruins the whole bounce of the beat. If you really want to spice your beats up, drum bounce is super important. It has to coincide with the melodies, and then the drums really have to be on point. So using hella effects on drums works just as well as on melodies. For 808s, you can put on chorus, you can put on stereo wideners, sometimes reverb for like high 808 slides and stuff like that. All these like little things that can add a little bit of like intricacy to your beats. Most of the stuff I use on my 808s are stock plugins, distortion, things like that, when you need that little extra beef in or extra punch in your 808, you can just use a simple EQ, boost the low end, boost the high end, boost the mids, you know. For hi-hats, I can actually show you that now. In this case, I actually stack the hi-hats with two patterns. The first pattern is the really basic pattern, and it just sets the tempo of the beat basically. So I usually just right click the hi-hats and go straight to fill each two steps. So I go into the piano roll, and then basically what I'm doing is alternating the velocities of each note. So I go from about 80 here, and then I go down to like about 40%. And then I just keep alternating that. Now for the second one, I save this one for the rolls, the intricate rolls. So I go in and I usually go to about like a 4-step or a 2-step pattern, double that, of course, not the first or second one here. And then I start programming hella rolls. And then I just kind of base it off of the basic hi-hat pattern that I have originally. You want to make sure the second bar of your beat is definitely different from the first bar. You don't want the drums to just keep repeating and you can just tell it's just a looping pattern. You want to make sure it's changing just ever so slightly in the second bar to make sure that, okay, yeah, this beat is going somewhere, this beat is progressing, and it makes your beat sound a little bit more interesting, and it makes it seem like it's a lot more going on when it's really not. And finally, for the hi-hats, for like effects and stuff, pretty much my standard is flangus and reverb, and I cut it up to about like 25%, 30%. And I usually have the flangus cranked up pretty high because I don't know why, it just tucks it in the back of the mix perfectly for me. And then the last like crazy sauce for hi-hats is looperator. So I have it specifically on the hi-hats, and I just have a little reverse effect that's happening every few bars. And I have this one part where it just puts full blast reverb on the hi-hats, and it's a pretty cool effect. Now for snares and claps, you don't have to really put too much. Just make sure you're mixing it correctly. You don't want the snare or claps too loud. In this beat, I have a rim acting as the snare or clap. I have a little bit of reverb on the rim, and I set up this cool little effect by layering two rims together and then having the reverse rim lead up into that. That I set up by basically layering one rim with another rim, basically the same rim, but I just put it in another mixer channel and I EQ'd it a lot. And here's pretty much all the effects for it: reverb, EQ, delay, flangus, a little bit of phaser, and then panamatic. And lastly, I would say play with the velocities of your drums. You can do this with all drums, but mostly I do it with the kicks here. So this is the same trick as alternating the velocities like the hi-hats. So I'm going from 40% velocity straight to 100%. And I just keep repeating that pattern over and over again where I see fit. All right, next up, I would say it would have to be transitions. Transitions are super important. You want to make sure that between the verse and the hook, that transition there, you make sure something different is happening, whether that be taking some of the drums out and then adding it back in later in the verse, or taking, maybe if there's a lead melody, you want to drop the melody out to give the artist room to rap on the verse. You want to make sure that your transitions flow as well. The best way to make your transitions flow is by using transitional effects. My Haze drum kit has really good effects in there, transitional effects as well. I have the two transitional effects here, and then I have a little crash here right when the beat drops for that crunch right when the one hits. Make sure you're using perk loops. These are actually both from Nick Mirror's Mirror Touch kit. So now if you have your transitional effects in there and you still feel like there's too much emptiness before the drop, the last thing I would recommend you do is add drum fills. So actually here I have 3 fills stacked on top of each other, 2 of them for my drum kit, and all I really have on here is the same effects that I put on my transitional effects, which is reverb, flangus, and a little bit of EQ. And first and foremost, I made sure to level all 3 of these so they stack and blend perfectly together, so none of them are overpowering each other, and you can hear all 3. Now, another thing you can do is humanize your melodies. Humanizing just basically means that you're putting the melodies or the drums off time a little bit to make sure that it has a more human feel. It's not super static, it's not super on beat, you know what I mean? To give it that more real feel, especially if you're making samples and loops and you're sending it out to other producers and stuff. You want that real, like, you don't have to put a full swing on the melody, but you can just shift it a little bit over, just like you do with hi-hats. You can hear that the piano is just hitting straight on every bar. But the main melody is going all over the place. It's playing in between the chords, basically. don't know if you noticed in the background, I have an ARP right under the guitar lead melody, and it sounds super fire because it's still playing in between the guitar melody too. So you want to make sure, even though it sounds like it's a lot going on, but now that it's leveled properly and it's not too much going on with the notes themselves, it creates a perfect melody all blended in together. Base it off of somebody that you like if you like how my beats sound, you use my master chain, right? But you want to make sure that eventually that you start to build and curate your own master chain. So as you can tell, your master chain can change at any moment whenever you feel like it. Likely in a few months, I might add a few things to my master chain, or I might subtract a few things. You never know. So for the EQ, I usually boost the low end, I boost the mids, wherever I see fit. This is different for every beat pretty much. Sometimes I might be subtracting low end or subtracting high end. It really just depends. I use my ears at this point. So for the multi-band compressor, I just go straight to the mastering 2.4 dB preset, and I take the limiter off, and then I play with the gain knob here. A lot of times when I put this preset on, it's a little too loud. It boosts the beat a little bit too much. So that's why I say I usually mess with the gain knob, because if I mixed it a little bit low, then I could push the gain up. And if I mixed it too high, then I could just pull the gain back. And then I just watch the levels on the master here and make sure that the levels don't go beyond 0, just like the soft clipper is supposed to be doing. Now, there are a plethora of other mixing techniques you can add to your mastering chain. You can look up gain staging. Not going to get into that because that's not really my forte. So go look up gain staging. These are more complex, and I would say these are, by the books, the correct way to mix and master your beats. Gain staging is a really good way to make your beats really pop, but it's a little bit more complex, and it takes a little bit more work. The pink noise technique, I don't know too much about it, but I know Internet Money has a really good video on it. Most of the mixing process should be done while you're making the beat. That's why it's not a lot to do after you finish the beat. You can just do the master chain and be done with it, because most of the leveling is done during the process of making the beat. Last thing I will say about mixing and mastering is, if your mix sounds bad before you put your master chain on, you're doing something wrong. Like if I take all of the stuff off of my master right now, it's going to almost sound exactly the same. The only thing that the master preset should be doing is making your beat loud enough. So definitely keep that in mind. Last up is arrangement. Arrangement is super simple, because if you arrange the first part, you don't have to arrange the second part. You could just, after you finish the first part of arranging, you can just copy and paste this whole half here and just copy and paste it right over. So as I said, probably midways into the video, from the hook part in my beat here is the part where the guitar melody comes in. And then when it switches from the hook part to the verse part, I drop the guitar melody out, and you can clearly tell that's where an artist would know, like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to rap at. There has to be some sort of indication there. Other than that, the only thing you need to know about arranging is that most hooks are about 8 bars or a little bit more than that, and then the verse parts are always longer. In this beat, it's a little bit longer than 8 bars. Most beats you can get away with 8 bars though. 8 bars for a verse, about 4+ bars for a hook. It really just depends on the timing. Like the BPM of this beat is 150. If it's lower, it might be shorter or longer depending on how you program the drums and stuff like that. So it's really up to you, but the standard really is about 8 bars for the verse, and then the hook is kind of up for debate, because it depends if you have like a pre-hook, which I have in my beat. So the hook is technically a little bit longer than it should be because I have a pre-hook, which most artists would usually use to still have the hook there, even though it's the pre-hook. Outros for beats should be super simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Sometimes you can do like the garage beat thing that I do. I only really do it for just kind of for show, for you guys, and for beat previews and stuff like that at the end of our videos. That's pretty much it. So I actually removed that for this beat, and all I have is an automation from 80% volume all the way down to 0, and I just dropped all the drums out. And that's usually what you do for an outro. You want to make sure that the drums don't just abruptly cut off or something like that, and then the beat just ends. Make sure there's a, you know, an outro. Make sure that the artist knows that like you kind of care about your craft. You're not just throwing these beats out for the hell of it, you know. So yeah, I drop out all the drums and I put the Reese bass back in, and I leave the perks in actually because they sound kind of cool, and then I just let it fade out. So yeah guys, that's it for this video. I hope I helped you out a lot. Hopefully you guys actually took your notebooks out and took a few notes. With that being said guys, that's it for this video. Share it with a friend if you think that this video will help him out, and if you like videos like these, please hit the like button, show your boy some love, hit that subscribe button if you're new. That being said guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.